thinking today, this is the first time I've been a Kentucky resident in 47 years. I graduated from Campbellsville College in 1970, and then I was off into the Marine Corps, so now I'm back home again. And it was funny, when I was at Campbellsville, I had this premonition that I would end up in Kentucky. And here I am. And there's a name that we have for Kentucky, and we call it God's country. I don't know why they call it that. It grows so much tobacco here, but anyway, God's country. And I really believe it's a special place, and I'm glad to be here. Kaylin says I got in I think it was more like 1:30 or whatever it was. I was tired when I got home. I was so tired getting here that I drove all the way to Liberty before I realized I'd passed 501. That's how tired I was. But it's by God's grace and those people praying for me that I made it at all. That said, I forgot all of my notes. I forgot my book. I forgot my Bible. I forgot my adapter. I forgot my clicker. I forgot a whole box of something. Hopefully my passport isn't in there, or I'm going back down to UT Pines for a couple of days. But I am glad to be here, and this is a very important subject. And it's interesting that you had mentioned your daughter. What did his daughter say she had? Leaky gut. Does anything about GMO and glyphosate have to do with leaky gut? That's the way it works. They take some proteins out of the Bacillus thuringiensis and puts it into a plant. And then that plant produces some strange protein that when the larva eats the protein, it gets into their bodies, changes shape, gets into the wall of their intestines and causes what?
Leaky gut.
Leaky gut. And it kills them. Of course, now they're saying that it doesn't affect humans. And you can keep your health plan if you like it, and you can keep your doctor if you like your doctor. And do you really believe what you're told? We need to be wise as serpents, gentle as doves. We're living in very, very serious times. So we're talking about glyphosate and genetically modified organisms. And whenever I speak to a group of people, especially on something like this, I have three groups of people. I have the curious. They don't know anything, but they're curious enough to show up to try to find out something. You've got the skeptical, those people who just know it's this way and they're not going to believe anything you have to say. Nothing I could say could change their mind. And then you have the crusader. Those people who are just going to get out there and do everything about it. I guess you also have the sonorous. Those people are just asleep. They don't even know what's going on. But I think we need to be wise in the times in which we live, because really the times in which we live, and this subject has a lot to do with our salvation. Oh, you trying to eat your way to heaven? No, but it's the basis. And I'm going to talk to you about something special. I was trying to find some slides to add to this program just a few minutes ago. I can find them in Japanese, I can find them in Italian and Russian and Romanian and Serbian, but I can't find my English slides, so we'll just go with that. There are brothers, good brothers and bad brothers. Do you know who the top brother, well I just say Hussein and Uday Hussein, Saddam Hussein's sons. They were probably not good boys. Then we have Wilbur and Orville Wright. They were good boys. I want to show you another couple of boys, and these are the boys right here. Do you know who they are? They have the same mother. Here's the first one. You ever heard of Agent Orange? Yes. Who was its mother? Monsanto and DuPont. They were sort of conglomerating in there. The second one, that's glyphosate. So they are brothers, and I would say that they are bad brothers. Now, probably none of you really, some of you may be of Vietnam age, but probably none of you were there, but Agent Orange was a big thing in Vietnam. What was Agent Orange used for? It was a defoliant, or basically an herbicide. And they sprayed it indiscriminately everywhere. They sprayed it from airplanes. They had soldiers spraying it on their naked body, spraying this Agent Orange all over the area, and they were told there's no problem with it. Does anyone know what the main problem with Agent Orange was? What the main chemical that's causing all the problems today? Dioxin. You ever heard of dioxin? Now, I will say to glyphosate's credit, it does not have dioxin, but it's doing something in another very sinister way. Some of the health effects of Agent Orange, and I'm bringing this up because they are made by the same company, they are brothers. All kinds of, you'll notice a lot of things here: stillbirth, premature birth, neural diseases. I'm pointing these out because these are very similar to what we're finding now with glyphosate. Things dealing with the nervous system, like multiple sclerosis, like Parkinson's disease, like Alzheimer's disease. Last, Pulcheria cutina tarda. I forget. Sounds like something to do with the skin to me. But here's some of the effects of the people living there in Vietnam. Because they sprayed, and when dioxin gets into the soil, it stays in the soil. It's not going to go away. And it's replicated right here in this country too. Not just in the cancers and other diseases that the soldiers, Marines, airmen, and sailors are getting, but also it's being passed down through the genome to their children. So it's a bad, bad thing. And when I asked the question before, and does this remind you of anything, remember in the early 60s, a medication that was given for morning sickness, thalidomide. And it caused unbelievable birth defects. Children with no arms, no legs, little flippers. And they found out, you can't take that for the first trimester. Well, they took it off the market, but it's back on the market today for something else with the instruction, don't take it if you're pregnant. Now, as far as I'm concerned, and this goes along with this and along with everything else, if it's not good for a fetus, it's not good for me either. It is going to cause some type of a genetic defect in a developing human being. I don't want it causing any defects in my cells, in my DNA. It's interesting that in certain places, the resistance to GMO is visceral. I was in Zambia in 2002. They shipped 35,000 tons of corn, or they call it maize, to Zambia because they were having a really bad famine. And the government, especially the president, says, you take that out of here. Now, I remember thinking at the time, hey, it's ground up, it's made into mealie meal, you can't plant it. But I think that man was way ahead of our time, because it's one thing to plant a genetically modified organism, and we'll talk about that in a moment, but it's another thing to put that thing into your body. And we're going to talk more about that, some of the ramifications of doing this. But have any of you ever been to Mexico? All right, I've been to Mexico. There's a thing we call Montezuma's Revenge. Another name Dr. Agatha Thrash used to call, she called it Turista. Anyone ever had Montezuma's Revenge? I've had it in India really bad. Why? Why can they drink the water, but we cannot drink the water? Because they've grown up with the microorganisms in their body. They have developed a resistance to the microorganisms in their body, and therefore their bodies don't have a problem with it. If my body has never seen it before, my body's going to react. When they make a genetically modified organism, what are they doing? What part of the organism, well, you're going to say DNA, but basically they're dealing with the protein. They're making a different type of a protein that your body has never seen before. As a matter of fact, they're making a type of protein that humanity has never seen before. And now you put that foreign protein into your body, what does your body think? We got a problem here. Okay, immune system, let's get working. Mast cells, put out some histamine. Whatever has to happen to fight that thing. And often, this thing can mimic another part of the human body. Let me give you an example. You've got two types, or at least two types of beta cells in the body. Beta cells. One type, you've got a beta cell in the immune system, which makes antibodies. You've also got beta cells in your pancreas. Another name for that beta cell is the islets of Langerhans. What does the islets of Langerhans do? They make insulin. Now, there's a problem. There's another, those beta cells in the pancreas are made up of 17 amino acids in a certain conglomeration, and they make the insulin. But there's a few quirks in nature. One quirk is there's another protein that looks just like that protein, 17 amino acids. That happens to be casein that's found in cow's milk. So now if a child is already casein intolerant and they put casein into the body, what does the other beta cell in the immune system do? Makes an antibody. And that antibody is a specialized target that's going to go after one target and one target only. That's the beta cells, well, that's casein. But it looks just like the beta cells in the pancreas. And now those antibodies go flowing through the body, get down to the pancreas, sees 17 amino acids, kills them, and what do you have now? Type 1 diabetes, which makes it, what type of a disease is it? It's an autoimmune disease. You will see, without a doubt in my mind, a rise in autoimmune diseases as a result of genetic modification. You're also going to see a rise in autoimmunity because of all the radioactive isotopes going out in the world from places like Fukushima Daiichi and Chernobyl. And I'll talk about those in a moment. Between 1996 and 2011, the widespread use of Roundup-ready GMO crops increased herbicide use in the U.S. by 527 million pounds. Even though Monsanto claims GMO crops will reduce pesticide and herbicide use. Why would that be? Why are we using more now than ever before? There's a couple of reasons. One reason is we're planting more and more genetically modified crops, which means you got to use more and more, because without Roundup Ready, it's not even going to produce. So they've got to spray the crop with this stuff, so the more you plant, the more you put onto the ground. And that's going to cause all other kinds of problems. Going back to what we talked about, and then that sort of shot off a little bit too soon, but when we start genetically modifying, we're modifying the genes. Down there, there's little gene segments in our DNA. And it's done by, well, it's a bigger process we've got time for, but it's very similar to the process that causes cancer. Cancer, at the bottom line, is a modification or a mutation of the human DNA. I mentioned Chernobyl. Does anyone know about Chernobyl? Yeah, 1986. This nuclear reactor in northern Ukraine melted down. Everything's okay now, right? When will everything be okay? When Jesus comes. When everything is burned up. That thing is still active. 3 times they've covered it with concrete and it breaks and it's still coming out. And then we have Fukushima Daiichi. This happened in 2011, March the 11th, 2011, and it is still hot. We've got radioactivity going to the atmosphere. We've got radioactivity going into the Pacific Ocean. We have it all over again. And I told the people at the time, matter of fact, twice, I have been invited to go to Fukushima and lecture because there is a way to protect yourself. There is a way to protect yourself from no matter what it is, whether it's glyphosate, GMO. What's the best way to protect yourself from GMO? Grow your own food. And I think it's time. Matter of fact, I meant to bring down here, just today, after 18 years, I took a box of open pollinated seed saver seeds out of my freezer, which I gave to our doctor at Uchee Pines, and now I've got these pure open pollinated heirloom seeds ready to go into the ground and produce my stuff. But now, I know we're getting, maybe you think us off this subject, but we're dealing with a big problem. And I'm trying to draw a few parallels to show you how much we need to really be careful about how we're living our lives today. There's not just one thing here, or maybe two things. It is everything. Everything is calculated against God's people. And at the end of the day, it's against God's people. Now, I will have to make a confession. I am a conspiracist. I do believe there is a movement afoot to reduce the world population. I think immunizations are going to play a major role in that, but don't quote me because it may not be that thing. But I really believe that they would like to get the population down to at least 1 billion rather than the 7 billion that they have. And when you think about Chernobyl and Fukushima Daiichi, this is what's basically happened. You've got a radioactive atom that's putting off radiation. You've got alpha particles and beta particles. And they go shooting out like a bullet. And if they go through the body and they hit your DNA, you're going to have a mutated DNA. You can get some of that radioactive, what we call them isotopes, in your body. You can take up resident in your body, but that's another whole situation. But these things can cause free radical damage. You've heard of free radical damage. Here's some of the causes of free radical damage. Air pollution. That's why we received counsel well over 100 years ago, out of the cities. Out of the cities. I am so glad to be out of the cities. Well, I haven't been in the city for a long time. Okay, cigarette smoke. Uh-oh, here we are in Kentucky. It's probably one of the smoking capitals in the world. Just stay away from them. Overeating can cause free radical damage. Why? Incomplete digestion. Producing amines and alcohols in your gut. How about high-fat diets? Do we like do high-fat diets taste good? If they didn't, you wouldn't eat them. Yeah, they taste very good. Your own immune system will produce free radicals. In the repair process, you're producing free radicals. And the aging process produces free radical damage. But now, here's what I believe. Isaiah said God knows the end from the beginning. In the beginning, let's just say the beginning of the creation of this earth, could God see July 2017? Could he see the mess that we're going to be living in? Does he have a solution? What's his solution for free radicals? Well, here's the free radical solution. All right? Here we have a free radical. It's an atom that's missing an electron in the outer ring. The way it's set up, 2 atoms, 2 electrons, 8 electrons, 8 electrons, and it goes out from there. This one's missing one, which means it's going to go searching for an extra electron. It'll steal one. Well, it'll steal one, and it starts a chain reaction, and if it goes all the way down into the DNA, then you have a mutation. Okay? So, We have something else over here. This is a different type of an atom on the left. Watch what it's going to do. Bless its heart, it just gave up an electron. Now, is this still a free radical? No, it's got 8 electrons in this outer ring. Is this a free radical? No. Why? Because God said in 2017 they're going to need extra help. What is that help? Where do we get that atom on the left? Antioxidants, exactly where you get that thing. And we have antioxidants all around us. And if some people say, well, I forget where to find them. Well, just think about colors. If it's white, like cauliflower, like onion, like garlic, it's got antioxidants. Red, matter of fact, red's one of the best antioxidants and also one of the best anti-cancers. Orange, blue, green, yellow. In plants, God has an abundance of antioxidants to protect us. Does he have things to protect us from other things? This is an interesting thing. The United States Global Geological Survey sampled waterways in 38 states and found glyphosate in the majority of rivers, streams, ditches, and rain. 70% of rainfall samples. So all this rain outside. It's no longer raining cats and dogs, folks. It's raining herbicides and pesticides. But God will protect us if we're wise. Oh, it's raining Roundup. Here we go. Exposure to Roundup could potentially alter your hormones. We have a hard enough time with our hormones and any help from glyphosate, leading to obesity, heart problems, and diabetes. Do we see an obesity epidemic today? Now, we can look at many different areas to get there, right? One of the main things I look at is high fructose corn syrup. But now let's exacerbate the high fructose corn syrup by using genetically modified corn to make the high fructose corn syrup. Now we've got a foreign protein in free fructose with glyphosate in it too. We've got a triple whammy right there. Do we have a problem with heart disease? Big problem. Is diabetes a pandemic in the world? An absolute pandemic everywhere. And let me just step aside just for a moment. Some of you might remember a pesticide called Alar. A-L-A-R. Does anyone remember Alar? It was a pesticide they used on apples. And it was a big thing back in the early 90s. They were spraying it. And we had a visiting professor at UT Pines. His name was Dr. Let me say it right. Dr. Mervyn Harding. He had 3 doctor's degrees. Yale, Sanford, and Loma Linda. The guy was brilliant. And someone asked the question, he says, what about all these apples with Alar in them? What can we eat? Everything has pesticides on it. He says, I'll give you 4 recommendations. First recommendation, choose your food carefully. Get the best you can. What's the best way to get the best food? Grow your own. But if you can't grow your own, when you go to the market, and someone says, that means we have to buy all organic foods. He says, Americans consume 80% more organic food than is produced. You understand? Yeah, they say it was organic. He says, do the best you can. Second step, prepare it as carefully as possible. 1, clean it. Always wash it first. Don't cook it to death. Don't oil it, fat it, salt it, sugar it to death. Just prepare it as healthy as possible. Third step, if you haven't done 1 and 2, I suggest you skip number 3, because number 3 is ask God to bless it. And if you have not done your part, don't insult Him and ask him to do his part. So we ask him to bless it. And number 4 is, then just eat it and don't worry about it. Because if you think it's going to hurt you, it will. So those are, I always thought that was brilliant. Anyway, we've got Roundup, we got glyphosate coming down in the rain. Interesting thing here, 60 to 100% of air is in the air, in the atmosphere. You ever hear something about the air filled with a deadly taint? Is that a quote that you've heard before? Yeah, the air is filled with a deadly taint. And not just glyphosate, not just free radicals, all these things. Anyway, 60 to 100% of air and water samples in Iowa and Mississippi found to contain glyphosate. Blood from pregnant women, non-pregnant women, and fetal cord, the thing that attaches mother to baby, tested positive for the insecticidal protein found in insect-resistant crops. Huh? That's the BT toxin, right. Yeah, the insecticidal is BT, right. You've got insecticidal and herbicidal, but this is the insecticidal. Roundup kills human cells. Now, when you say Roundup, if you look at frankly, I could not find the full ingredients to Roundup. It's sort of like the ingredients for Coca-Cola. Only 2 living people know it, and it's in a safe somewhere. No one knows the ingredients. But I'm going to mention one of the, what's inert mean? Inactive, it doesn't do anything. It has a number of inert chemicals along with it, and that is the bugaboo. And they won't tell you what they are, but I do have one of them here. Anyway, Roundup kills humans. Low levels of 4 glyphosate formulations used in Roundup, levels far below what's allowed in agriculture, levels on par with what's in our food. If you are eating a genetically modified organism, you are eating these things in your food. All kill human umbilical, embryonic, and placental cells within 24 hours. And there's the inert chemical. Polyethoxylated toluene, or POEA, an inert ingredient in Roundup. This is one of the inert chemicals. More deadly to human embryonic, placental, and umbilical cord cells than the herbicide itself. One of the scientists called this astonishing, shocking. I would call this downright diabolical. That's the best name I can think about it. Diabolical. And it gets worse. Look at this one. Over 1/3 of HT, this is the herbicide, acres are infested with glyphosate-resistant weeds. We're now being told to use 2,4-D. Does anyone know what 2,4-D is? Huh? It's 50% of Agent Orange. Now they're saying, let's put 2,4-D into, they're making genetically modified organisms now resistant, that will make them 2,4-D resistant. So now they can spray the crops with 2,4-D. Does this sound like insanity to you? Do you think these scientists weren't born early enough to realize what happened in Vietnam? Maybe they need to take that whole group of scientists to Vietnam and let them go to some of these hospitals and some of these homes where they're dealing with children who grow up playing in ground saturated with 2,4-D. It's a serious, serious subject. I forgot to put a picture here. Now genetically modified crops are being developed that are genetically resistant to 2,4-D. Yeah. Okay, 23 weeds are resistant to glyphosate now. You know, now I know some of you nurses, the PDR, the Physician's Desk Reference, how big of a book is that? Oh, that's a big, thick book. Big book. How often do they print it? Huh? 3? I thought it was every year. Maybe it's every 3 years. I think it's every year. Why? Because basically most drugs go off the market within 5 years.
Also, they have that section of side effects.
Well, most of the PDR will name the drug, what you take it for, and then it'll have 2 or 3 pages of side effects, adverse conditions, don't take it if this is happening, it can cause this thing. When I read this possible side effects, I say, I'll take the problem in the first place, rather than deal with liver failure. And almost always it's going to mention liver. Why? Because your liver detoxifies. And every drug is a toxin. Okay? Now, is there a time for it? Is there a time to use drugs? We had a philosophy. Dr. Agatha Thrash had a philosophy. She says, when we have to resort to drugs, it's an admission we don't understand physiology well enough. Because I know there's a cure for every known disease. Why do I know that? Where did every disease come from? Sin, all right? Where did every sin come from? How about Satan? The originator. He's the father of lies. He was a murderer from the beginning. He is the one that came up with every known disease. Who's smarter, Satan or God? See, God knows his mind, and before Satan even thought of it, God already had the solution. Our job is to find the solution to the problem and use God's solution. Now, we're talking about things mutating here. There's a natural mutation. How many possible types of influenza are there? Do name by scientific names for influenza. Give me bird flu scientifically. No, swine flu scientifically. Huh? H1N1. All right. What is the H? What's the N? Hemagglutinin, neuraminidase. These are 2 antigens on the coat of the virus that causes the influenza. So they, from that they formulate it. So basically, if you have an H2N5, and there is one, is a variant, I think, of avian flu, how many different types, how many variations of influenza can you have if you have H2N5? Huh? 2 times 5, 10. Just make a graph. You got H1N2, H1, H1, H2, N1, N2, N3, N4, 10. They found a fruit bat in Peru that was H11, N18. What's the probability? 198. Now, why am I mentioning this thing? These things have a way of changing. Survival of the fittest, maybe. Have you ever heard of a thing called MRSA? I know nurses have heard of MRSA. Anyone who works around hospitals have heard of MRSA. Why? Where do we find MRSA? In hospitals. It's not a place for a well person to go. If you go to a hospital, you had better be very well. Well, it is resistant to some commonly used antibiotics. Well, it mentions one. What's the M stand for? Methicillin. A strong antibiotic. R, resistant. SA, Staphylococcus aureus. And it's resistant because it's been growing up in an environment of drugs and of sickness. And it changes to the point where it's now resistant. So what do we have now? We have sentenced ourselves to chemical inflation. Use more and more of stronger and stronger herbicides, pesticides, becoming more and more dependent on their use and becoming more and more expensive along the way and more deadly. 2,4-D, come on, what are we doing with ourselves? It's amazing. the people who make the genetically modified seeds, which are patented, also make the chemicals that they have to use, you have to use if you got those seeds, and it just goes around and around. And there's a diabolical end to that we're going to get to before we're done here. 45% of Americans will be diagnosed with cancer in their lifetimes. 45%. Which basically means almost half of us here right now will end up with cancer. It may not be terminal cancer, but you're going to get cancer of some sort in your life. And I'm not talking about some simple little, squamous cell carcinoma or some skin cancer. Main issue is chemicals such as herbicides and pesticides found in our air, water, soil, and food. Now this is from a large study that was done. This is just quoting them. I should have put the name at the bottom. Absolute correlation between pesticide exposure and ADHD. ADHD, I'm sorry. What do they say? I'm back with influenza. ADHD. When I was in elementary school, I knew nobody with ADHD. If you misbehaved, what happened? You had to put your hands on the desk and bend over, and you got whopped good. And if you went home and told your daddy about it, if I told my daddy about it, I would have walked up and down that road. And he would not have been put in jail, and the teacher would not have been put in jail. But now that we're resisting these things, and those things are against the law, now the children are being put in jail because they have never learned to behave. And maybe it's because we're putting things into the body that they cannot control their emotions. They cannot control the expression of the things going on in their bodies. Alzheimer's disease is also linked to these things. And this is an interesting advertisement. Did you know genetically engineered soybeans have DNA from bacteria and viruses? Well, we know that. That's BT. Spliced into their DNA to help them tolerate weed killers such as Roundup. This genetic feat creates a whole new species of plant that would have never occurred in nature. God gave a law. He gave a law we're going to look at. A GMO label doesn't seem like too much to ask for, does it? In Europe, you have to label if it's GMO. You remember a few years ago, there was a bill before, I think it was in California, to label genetic modification. Monsanto spent millions of dollars. You know what their argument was? If we have to label it, your food's going to cost more. You think it's all that extra ink? And it was defeated by the gullible sheeple. We spray it everywhere. We spray it around our homes. And once we do all this spraying, what's going to happen next? You're probably eating Roundup in excessive levels if it doesn't say non-GMO. And I don't know if I can really trust that anymore. The top 10 genetically modified foods. Yes, question?
My daughter sent me a step video yesterday of a crop dust. She lives in Iowa. There was a plane going around with a car next to her. So what was he probably dropping? Okay, so lady's daughter, she saw a crop duster spraying. What was he probably spraying? I suspect it wasn't holy water. I suspect it was probably Roundup or some type of a herbicide. Huh? Oh, biplanes is what does it. You know, see, when you fly an airplane, if you're ever flying an airplane, you've got a small plane and you're coming down behind it, okay, for all the other conversations then. If you're coming behind somebody else, the wings produces wind forces, and a small plane gets caught in that, it'll take you like a tornado around. So basically, if you ever see a photo, or if you stand there watching the plane come on, you'll see these things, this herbicides, chemicals, whatever it is, just swirling out and covering. It does quite a nice job. But look at this thing. Papayas. Why in the world would they want to ruin a grapefruit like papaya? Rapeseed, canola, potatoes. BT, right there, your tomato. Tomatoes. Matter of fact, they've got some pig genes in tomatoes now. Pretty nasty things going on. Dairy, peas, rice, all those things. You know, they were genetically modifying some rice in Asia, trying to increase the vitamin A, and they produced a yellow rice. The people wouldn't eat it. They want the rice that they know. They will not eat foreign rice. Roundup is a systemic chemical, meaning Roundup is taken up inside of the plants that we and farm animals eat. But let me tell you this, if a farm animal has a choice, it will not eat genetically modified food. If you have a pile of genetically modified corn here and a pile of non-genetically modified corn here, they'll eat this one. But what's wrong with that? What's wrong with that statement right there? What? Cows weren't made to eat grain. They're made to eat grass. Grain it just fattens them up. It's not natural for them to eat the grains. Anyway, that's another whole subject. Norwegian scientists studying U.S. soy found excessive levels of glyphosate inside of the food crop. I hope it doesn't get into tofu. I really like tofu and soy milk and all the other good things. Are you familiar with this term, biomagnification? Well, the slide didn't. I don't know.
That's one of the biggest ones.
But this is, yeah, it's so big. Now, one of the myths about genetic modification is it increases crop yield. It doesn't increase crop yield. It just keeps the weed down and the pests down so you can get the full benefit of the crop in the first place. But do you realize that every plant that God created had natural herbicide and pesticide values in it? And if it wasn't for the fact that we have destroyed the earth by planting tobacco everywhere and cotton everywhere in the South, and so you don't have the right nutrients so the plant can grow big and strong by itself, it would be strong enough to fight it in the first place. And another thing there is the strength of a plant is in its roots. We produce hard pan. You know what hard pan is? You got your tiller, and it looks so nice. How deep did that tiller machine go? About this deep. What's here? Hard pan. And it's hard as a rock sometimes. Roots go down, boink, and this way. It doesn't go down deep into the soil. We need to rip deep and never step in our soil again. Okay, biomagnification. If you have a body of water and you have a mild, let's say a little bit of glyphosate getting into the water, very small parts per million, but living in the water, there are things called plankton. You're all familiar with plankton, little plants that live in the water. Now, they live there, they spend their whole lives there. Now they're going to start to magnify what was in their environment. Do you see what's happening here? But now we have some fish in the water called herbivorous fish. They're going to eat the plankton, and now it's up to a half of a part per million. See how much faster it magnified? But now there are bigger fish in the water. They're called carnivorous fish. They're going to eat the herbivorous fish, and now we've got it magnifying again. What's the next step on the food chain? Yeah, we're the next step on the food chain. What is the magnification now? 25 plus parts per million. Not just fish, everything in the biosphere, especially things that store toxins in fat. That means animals, fish, birds, four-footed animals. 25 parts per million. Let me give you an example of biomagnification. There was a ship, a friend of mine was a Navy doctor, and he told me the story about a ship was off the coast of the Philippines, and influenza got on the ship. If you've ever had influenza, you are down. You can't do anything. Every single person got it but one. That's the captain of the ship. So he went down, locked himself in his room. They dropped anchor and just waited because they couldn't work. Well, after a few days, some of the sailors were feeling better, so they went fishing over the side. And they caught a couple of lobsters. And they thought, won't the captain love these lobsters? So they took the lobsters to the cook. The cook prepared them, took them to the captain. The captain got the worst case of flu of anybody. Why? Well, you have to serve on a Navy ship, at least when I was in the military. When you go to the toilet, it just plops straight into the ocean. And it comes floating down, and what's the purpose of a lobster? Clean up the ocean floor. And so those lobsters just congregated there, eating all of this virus-laden feces of sick sailors. And so when the captain ate the lobsters, he was eating processed sailor feces, and he got a terrible case. Biomagnification, what goes around comes around. Glyphosate, this is from the world. Now, I don't agree with everything the World Health Organization says. There are some things I do agree with. One of them is, if we could supply developing countries with good sources of drinking water, diseases would fall 80%. Wow. Glyphosate, probably a human carcinogen. Not probably, it is. An association between non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, this is one of the big ones, and glyphosate. Significant evidence that the chemical causes cancer in lab animals, and strong evidence that it damages human DNA. And when it damages human DNA, we call that mutating it. What do we have? Cancer. All diseases, it's going to be a mutation of DNA. Roundup 2X. Now they're starting to get some new Roundups. Risk of lymphoma, 2 times risk of lymphoma. Meta review. What is a meta review? They took 44 other studies, and scientists did, and looked at what they said. What did we learn from those 44 studies? Glyphosate disrupts normal functioning of WBC, white blood cell. Another word for immune system. Immune system dysfunctional. Roundup formulated in 1974, marketed as environmental friendly and biodegradable, just like that good old Agent Orange was. It encourages use on roadsides, golf courses, lawns, playgrounds, schoolyards, home gardens. You think it's making them a lot of money? Wow. A French court ruled those marketing claims amounted to false advertising. I love it. Health problems attributed to Roundup and or glyphosate, we've already mentioned some of these. ADHD, we won't go there very long. Alzheimer's disease, we've already mentioned Alzheimer's disease. I want to get to basically my punchline here. U.S. veterans and Vietnamese people still dying from Agent Orange. Folks, it's a real thing. But they're not the only ones dying, and really they're the top of the chain dying. But how about the beautiful monarch butterfly? They've almost been wiped out of this country. Why? Because the herbicide they spray on corn kills the milkweed upon which the monarch butterfly lays his egg, and that's what the larvae eat. What a sad world for our children and our grandchildren to grow up with no monarch butterflies. To me, that's one of the most beautiful butterflies there is. Organic, okay, here we go, Italian. Organic modified, genetically modified. But here's God's law. Leviticus 19:19. God wrote a law about this very thing. He says, you shall keep my statutes. You shall not let your cattle breed with different kinds. That doesn't mean a Holstein can't breed with a Guernsey. It means a Holstein cannot reproduce with a quarter horse or a Appaloosa. Don't get different animals doing this together. You shall not sow your field with two kinds of seeds. It's okay to have things that, well, I'm really not really into hybrids either, because you can't save the hybrid seed and plant and get the same thing again. But God is looking at something else. I was going to add another whole section because he was looking backwards to the antediluvians. I believe the antediluvians were into genetic modification. But we're there again. We have produced genetically modified pigs for the purpose of making blood that's wholly useful to humans. It's not been perfected yet, but they've got human genes in pigs to make human blood. Out in Nevada, they have made sheep, genetically modified sheep, which consist of 20% human cells, so they can have human hearts and human livers ready for transplants. And you can have the rest for supper if you want to. And in California, they have mice with human brain neurons. What God say? Don't cross different animals with each other. To me, this is a big sign that we're living at the end of time. But one other thing, the little subsistence farmer. How many subsistence farmers are there in the world? One figure I looked at one time says 1.2 billion people. What does it mean to be a subsistence farmer? Well, here's that poor subsistence farmer happening to him. Here's a subsistence farmer. This is my friend Nelson. He lives in a place called Shingoma, over in the country of Zambia. It's over the mountain from Riverside Farm. He is a subsistence farmer. That means every year, and this is his father, this is one of his father's wives, this is another one of his father's wives, the other one wasn't there at the time. He died. Nelson's taking care of everybody, all of everyone's children, his brother's children who have died. So every year he plants his corn, he grows his corn, he takes some of the corn and saves it for next year and plants it, okay? That's what's called a subsistence farmer. He lives on what he can make. Now what happens one day if he gets a knock on the door and the guy says, I want to give you these seeds. They will produce so nicely, you don't have to work so hard, and maybe the hippopotamus don't like it. See, one of his problems, the hippos come out of the Kafui River and trample down his corn, and he's not allowed to shoot them. So this guy gives him these seeds, my friend plants them, and boom, they grow wonderful. Hippos don't like it, weeds don't like it, big, juicy ears of corn where they let them dry and make mealie meal. So what does he do with the old corn? He eats it. And he saves some of this new corn. And next year, like he did during his whole life, he plants it and he waits and nothing comes up. Another knock on the door. I got some more seeds, and he reaches up, oh, not so fast this time. This time, it's going to cost you. Keep that thought in mind. There was a song back in the 1950s, 1960s. I remember Tennessee Ernie Ford singing it. You load 16 tons, and what do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. St. Peter, don't you call me, because I can't go. Why? I owe my soul to the company store. I believe this is what we're looking at right now. There is a plot. This is not about reducing world population. This is not about Monsanto getting a lot of money. Let me just give you, this lady is very interesting. Dr. Vandana Shiva from India. Monsanto's super profits and royalties have trapped our farmers in debt. Don't call me, Peter, I can't go. And 250,000 Indian farmers, mostly in the cotton areas, have committed suicide. Patents on seeds means genocide. This is what I think it's all about right here. Revelation 13, 16 to 17. And he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in the right hand and foreheads. that no man might buy or sell. If we have gotten into this genetically modified mindset, if we go to the store every year and get our genetically modified seeds, what's going to happen when the day comes? You can't buy them anymore, and you've already eaten everything you had, and you can't plant any seeds that were left over from what you ate. What are you going to do? You're going to starve, or you're going to get the mark of the beast. God wants us to be wise. I think the reason we should study this whole thing is not just for the health reasons, not just, well, that's the big thing we always think about, but to me, it's far beyond health reasons. It has to do with our salvation. I believe that this is what's working behind all these things right now. Is Satan's trying to get a hold of everything so that we cannot have anything unless we buy or sell. Now's the time to get the right seeds. Now's the time to plant our own food. Now's the time to become totally self-sufficient. I don't mean running off and living in a cave in the mountains, because I believe there's going to be a period of time that we're going to be running through all this time. This doesn't going to happen in 1 week. I can fast for a week. I believe there's a period of time, and that'd be another interesting study. So that's basically, in a very short span, a little bit on genetic modification. We're living in serious times. We need to take these things to heart. We need to detoxify our bodies. God has a way to get toxins out of our bodies, that glyphosate out of our bodies. But as your daughter says, leaky gut, if we put those things into our bodies, how do we know that they won't change once they get in there and get into our gut, and now we've got leaky gut, which is going to cause a whole constellation of problems, major problems. But God's not done. He will have a people that stand at the end of time, and as it says of the children of Israel, there is not one sick person among them. That's talking about us.